So we're going to start off with a shout out to all the kids that got hundreds on the quiz. Look at this group. Nice job, guys. Take a look. All right, so I'm going to go over quiz number 3. Yes, I'm formal because it's time. It's time to get formal, get focused. Let's get this stuff done. All right. We got to go over quiz 3. I'm going to go over all 10 questions. Make sure that you got this stuff down, and if you want to retake it, you can. I'm going to change the questions around a little bit. They're not going to be the same questions, but they're going to be very similar. If you like your grade that you have already, you're good. You don't have to retake. But if you want to retake, you can. And I'm going to post that here very soon. All right, so let me go through all of the quiz questions right now. All right, so here's the first 2 questions from the quiz. You were asked to convert these to degrees. They're in radians. So number 1, I think most people got number 1 right, but let me just go through it real quick. You're going to multiply by 180 over pi. That's going to get you in degrees. Your pi's are going to cancel. Looking to see if we can do any reducing here. Will 8 go into 180 evenly? No, it doesn't. But you can at least knock them down by 4. 4 goes into 8 twice. It goes into 180 45 times. And then 45 times 5 is going to be 225 over 2, which came out to 112.5 degrees, which I think most of you selected on your quiz. All right, so let's go to number 2. Negative 3 pi over 4 times 180 over pi. Your pi's cancel out. 4 goes into 180 45 times, and 45 times negative 3 is going to be negative 135 degrees. So there was number 1 and number 2. I have returned the quizzes to you, so you should be able to open them up and see which questions you missed and follow along here as I go over this stuff. All right, so question 3, wanted the cotangent of 3 pi over 2. First thing we want to do is convert that to degrees. So take 3 pi over 2, multiply by 180 over pi. Pi's cancel out. 2 goes into 180 90 times. 90 times 3 is 270. So we're looking for the cotangent of 270. Gotta get my light on. Boom. So to do that, we're going to find the tangent of 270 and flip it. So let's do the tangent of 270. Remember, to find the tangent of 270, you're going to do the sine of 270 over the cosine of 270. All right, that's going to come from your unit circle. So we go to the unit circle, we go to 270. Your sine is your y value, which is negative 1. Your cosine is your x value, which is 0. So I get negative 1 over 0, which is undefined. But we're going to flip it. Remember, this is cotangent. So when I take negative 1 over 0 and I flip it, I get 0 over negative 1, which is just 0. So the cotangent of 270 is 0. All right, here's number 4. The sine of 5 pi over 3. We got to take 5 pi over 3 and switch it to degrees first. 5 pi over 3 times 180 over pi. Pi's cancel. 3 goes into 180 60 times. 60 times 5 is 300. So we're trying to find the sine of 300 degrees. So sketch that real quick. 300 sits right there. The sine of 300, so we got a reference angle of 60 degrees right here. So we're actually finding the sine of 60 degrees. That's really what we're doing. Sine of 60, 30, 60, 90 triangle. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Radical 3 over 2. But we are in the C quadrant of ASTC, which we got to be very careful of all the time. I think that's the number 1 reason why a lot of you missed questions is you weren't paying attention to what quadrant you were in. You have to, because it affects your answer as far as positives and negatives. This is going to be a negative radical 3 over 2 because we are in the 4th quadrant. Okay, question 5, probably the most commonly missed question on this quiz. All right, let me show you why. you got to take negative 2 pi and you have to convert it to degrees first. All right, that's the easy part. So you take negative 2 pi, call it over 1 if you want, multiply it by 180 over pi. Pi's cancel. Negative 2 times 180 is negative 360. So we're finding the cosecant of negative 360. All right, where is negative 360? If you go in the negative direction, negative 360 is right there. It's 0. 0 degrees, negative 360, 360, they're all the same. They're coterminal. So we're actually finding the cosecant of 0 degrees, or 360 if you want to call it that. All right, to do that, you got to find the sine of 0 first, because remember, cosecant is reciprocal with sine. So if I find the sine of 0 degrees first, so unit circle, 0 degrees, sine is your y value, so it's going to be 0. So the sine of 0 is 0, which is really 0 over 1. Now, remember, we're trying to find the cosecant of it. So if I want to find the cosecant, I got to take this answer and flip it. When I take 0 over 1 and flip it, it becomes 1 over 0, which is a problem. So that becomes undefined. So the answer should have been undefined for that one because you have a 0 in the denominator. All right, number 6 was the cosecant of 330. So let's first sketch a quick picture, get the reference angle. 330 sits right there, has a reference angle of 30 degrees. So we're actually finding the cosecant of 30 degrees. Cosecant is sine's reciprocal, so if we just find the sine of 30 first and flip it, we'll have our answer. So let's find the sine of 30. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so it's going to be 1/2. We're going to flip it to become 2 over 1. But, again, this seems to be a problem for most of you. We are in the C quadrant, ASTC, so we're in quadrant 4, which means sine is negative, which means cosecant must be negative. So I need to put a negative on there, so it's negative 2 over 1. All right, so watch out for your negatives. Pay attention to what quadrant you're in. Number 7 is asking you for the secant of negative pi over 3. Let's take negative pi over 3, convert it to degrees first, multiply by 180 over pi. Pi's cancel. 3 goes into 180 60 times. We're looking at negative 60 degrees. So we're actually finding the secant of negative 60. All right, negative 60 is right here. Its reference angle is still 60. Drop down 60, it still has a reference angle of 60. So really we're just finding the secant of 60 degrees. And remember, secant is the reciprocal of cosine, so let's find the cosine of 60 first. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, 1 over 2. We need to flip it to get the reciprocal because we're finding secant, so it's going to be 2 over 1. And ASTC, we are in the C quadrant. Cosine is positive in that quadrant, so secant's going to be positive because they're reciprocals of each other. So we're going to keep that as a positive 2 over 1. So that was number 7. All right, numbers 8, 9, and 10 all use the same information. You were told that the tangent of A was negative 3/4. You were and also told the sine of A is greater than 0. All of that is going to establish what quadrant you're in for you. All right, so tangent's negative, sine is bigger than 0, which means it's positive. So ASTC. All right, so where is tangent negative and sine positive at the same time? Right here in quadrant 2. That's the whole key, is that we're in quadrant 2. So you need to make sure you're in quadrant 2 for this entire section of questions, 8, 9, and 10. All right, so for number 8, it asks for the cosine. So let's first sketch angle A. Angle A is landing over here in quadrant 2. I figured that out. Drop this down, make a right angle. Let's use angle A as reference angle. Sketch a picture here. Tangent is opposite over adjacent, so opposite is 3, adjacent's 4. You can use the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared, to find that hypotenuse right there. The hypotenuse is going to come out to be 5. Some of you, when you did the Pythagorean theorem, you used negative 3 squared plus 4 squared equals c squared. First of all, you don't want to use -3 because -3 is not the length of the side. The length of the side is just 3, not -3. All right, but if you did accidentally use -3, you need to make sure it's in parentheses when you square it because it becomes +9, not -9. Remember on your calculator, if you do that, you got to have parentheses around -3 if you're going to square it. All right, so anyways, this side came out to be 5. So once we have that, this question asked for the cosine of A. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 4/5. But because we are in the S quadrant, it's going to be -4/5. So once again, you got to pay attention to your quadrants. All right, so numbers 9 and 10 all build off of that same picture that we had for number 8, so I left it up here. Number 9 asks for the sine of A. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so 3/5. It's going to stay a +3/5 because we're in the S quadrant and sine is positive there, so that's number 9. Number 10 asks for the secant of A. The secant of A is going to be the cosine flipped. So we already found the cosine of A actually in number 8. All right, remember the cosine of A was 4/5, but it was negative because we were in the S quadrant. So when you take -4/5 and you flip it, you get -5/4. So that should have been your secant of A. So the big thing here is making sure you're paying attention to what quadrant you're in to know whether your answer is positive or negative. I think that's probably the number one reason some of you got tripped up. I'm going to repost a new quiz. It's going to have very similar questions, just worded a little differently, a little bit different answers. You can resubmit. You don't have to resubmit. If you like your grade you already have, you're good.